Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Eric Toring. I'm the Senior Vice President for the American College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine, and I want to welcome you to the webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by the American College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine and its partner organizations, the National Association of Federal Veterinarians, the American Association of Food Safety and Public Health Veterinarians, the National Association of State Public Health Veterinarians, and the U.S. Animal Health Association. So I would like now to turn it over to the chair of our Continuing Education Committee for the introduction of our guest speaker today.
Hello, that's me, Heather Sharanganathan, and hopefully everybody can hear me. And just to put a plug in, if you're interested in speaking or know someone who you would like to have speak, please let the CE committee know. We'd love to have any recommendations. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Beth Bennett. She's the first Chief Veterinary Officer of the American Association of Veterinary State Boards. Her work focuses on providing regulatory and licensure support to veterinary regulatory boards, performing outreach to all stakeholders within the veterinary profession, and providing education on relevant topics such as spectrum of care, veterinary technician utilization, and the use of emerging technology in veterinary medicine. Before joining AAVSB, Dr. Bennett practiced emergency and general veterinary medicine for over a decade and held an AAAS fellowship with the U.S. Department of State, where she specialized in global biorisk management for the prevention of zoonotic diseases. Through her work at AAVSB, she continues to participate in critical conversations at the intersection of veterinary care, public protection, and the future of the profession. And I'm looking forward to your talk today. I think it's very relevant to our times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? You can hear me okay? Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. My Wi-Fi is a little unstable, so I'm going to turn my camera off, so hopefully you don't lose me. So yes, this is the talk on the regulatory considerations of the use of artificial intelligence in veterinary medicine. So this all came out of a paper, a research paper that was published in last year, 2025. It is available to the public on our website, aavsb.org, and go to our About AAVSB and then model documents and white paper. It was written in collaboration with a lot of people, so AI subject matter experts and users. We had regulatory and legal experts, academia, representatives from professional and specialty associations, and industry leaders. And but as a disclosure, and this is the theme of this talk, I did use ChatGPT to create an outline. Spoiler, it was not very good, so I actually rewrote most of it, but I also used it for some content. However, as a licensed veterinarian for AAVSB, I am responsible for the final content of this presentation. In the paper, we have a position statement, and it basically says, we support innovation. We are not here to stifle innovation. We recognize the benefits of AI and other emerging technologies on veterinary profession. However, licensees, and when I say licensees, I mean veterinarians and licensed veterinary technicians, must understand the risks and limitations of AI to protect the standard of patient care and prevent unlicensed practice. Maintaining full transparency regarding the AI use, safeguard client data privacy, and obtain full consent when you're using it when appropriate. We encourage our member boards, and our member boards are the regulatory boards in the United States and Canada. So we have 62 member boards. We encourage them to educate licensees on the regulatory considerations of AI use. And licensees and facilities must comply with their jurisdiction's Veterinary Practice Act and other applicable federal and jurisdictional laws. So we looked at three basic applications, the natural language and processing applications, which allow computers to process, understand, and generate human language. So that's, for example, with medical records. the computer vision applications. So that's when computers and systems can interpret, understand, and process visual data that approximates human visual perception. So that would be X-ray review or cytology review. And then much less infrequently used are robotic system applications, and that's the integration of intelligent systems and machines that are designed to perform tasks. So, for example, where the machine interacts with the environment around it through the use of AI, and that example for that is drones or AI-powered surgeons. So, like I said, there is many benefits that AI bring to our lives and to veterinary medicine, including administration help, so that veterinarians have more time for patients. The ability to perform large data analysis very quickly, so they can do meta-analysis and just look at a large body of knowledge to come up with conclusions that can help with drug discovery, and then also can allow for early detection of outbreaks because it can, do more minute syndromic surveillance. But this has to be weighed against the risks. And these risks, as I'm sure we all know, include fabricated or hallucinated data. We can get unexpected errors. There's also, unfortunately, in veterinary medicine, which we'll go into a little bit later, there's a lack of real world evidence. So there's a real lack of available evidence showing the efficacy, specificity, sensitivity of these machines. Or even when you look at an AI transcribing device, there is not a lot of information out there about how accurate these devices are. So when you're choosing a device, you have an objective resource to look at to determine which ones you want. And then there's bias. So much bias, which we're going to get into in a second, both from the developer, but then also from the veterinarian. So this paper was written in 2025. In the beginning of the year, I also co-wrote a paper with the NAVC's Veterinary Innovation Council. And photo is from VMX in 2025, and I'm sitting in the audience. And the slide that's up there is basically the slide talking through the material that I contributed to this paper. And I looked over to the person next to me in the bottom left, and she was writing in her little tablet, and it says, responsibility still on the veterinarian. Duh. And I thought to myself, well, why did I even do all this if this could be, just summed up by responsibility still on the veterinarian? Duh. But the thing is that kind of ignores the problems of bias and black box. So automation bias is something that we are all susceptible to. And it is the tendency to trust automated systems or technology, even when contradictory evidence exists. The example I give is how many people, you go into Google and you type a question into Google, and then you get that AI response at the top. And a study a year or two ago suggested that about 60% of people don't go any farther past just reading that. So they can track, the analytics, they can track how many people scroll down or click on a link. And more than half, 60%, just read that summary and consider a case closed. I do it myself. The thing that you don't know, or you may not know, is the majority of that information, also, it comes from Reddit. So you're taking something as accurate that came from a source that the accuracy is not proven. And yet, because it is in technology and because it's provided by technology, people trust it without questioning. And now I see that they do have the links for the sources for the information, which is I'm very happy to see. But that's not the case for veterinary medicine. Veterinarians must apply their own judgment and must review the outputs critically to determine how good they are. But that gets us to this black box problem, which is on the right-hand side. And it goes into basically garbage in, garbage out. The data and the model interact to give a result. You could have a very good model, diamond quality model, but if the data that goes into it is bad, the result is going to be bad. Conversely, you could have great data, but if the model interprets it bad, the result is going to be bad. And the problem that we have in veterinary medicine is that we don't have this information on the data or the model to determine how good the result is. And that's the black box problem. This is a paper that came out in 2024. I love it. I love this diagram. And it goes into automation bias. On the left-hand side are the things that contribute to automation bias. So the difficulty of the task and the workload. The more difficult it is, or the higher the workload, the more likely a human is to just defer their judgment to the AI device. Insufficient experience of healthcare providers, both with the tasks that they're asking the AI to do, but then also inexperience with the AI tool themselves. That contributes to automation bias. Ambiguity of the AI algorithms, like I just talked about, the black box problem, and then bias in training data. So we always have to remember that data is just data, but there is an individual or group of individuals that decide what data goes into this tool. And that decision, whether inadvertently or on purpose, provides bias into the training data. So for an example, you could be working with something that is trained on a tertiary care facility, and you use it to help fill in medical records. But if you're in general practice, the medical record, if it fills in differentials or gives suggestions for next steps, that's going to be biased to a higher level of medicine than perhaps the population that you serve might not be looking for. So that's bias in training data. And on the right-hand side are things that automation bias leads to. So it can lead to de-skilling of operators. So we actually get lazy and because we're not using our mental muscles, they get weaker. It can lead to medical errors and deterioration of AI performance. And what this last one is a negative feedback loop. So generative AI's job is to produce things. Our job is to tell AI if it's wrong. If we don't tell it it's wrong, then it's going to continue to assume that the assumptions that it makes are correct and build on those errors over and over again. So that's why there really needs to be a human in the loop to tell it when it's wrong. So this attitude falls apart when it comes to automation bias, because if you just assume, okay, responsibility is on the veterinarian, I got this, without thinking that your responsibility and your judgment is affected by the fact that it is a digital result, then you can't review the outputs critically. And there's so many other biases involved in AI. So confirmation bias, algorithmic bias, measurement bias, generative bias, sampling bias, group bias, automation bias, reporting bias. All of these are so important to understand. And this is a whole separate talk in itself that one day when I have time, I'm going to make it. But I urge you, if you are using AI in your professional life, look at these different biases and figure out, how can I detect these and how can I go around them? This paper also provides some mitigation and preventative strategies. Most importantly, and we've heard it all at this point, human in the loop design. So always have a human in the loop to verify and confirm the output of the AI. Improve explainability of the AI tool. Take training and ownership over your device. So make sure that it works the way you want it to. Make sure it becomes trained the way it must. And then regulations on AI is very important. So that's where we get to kind of the basis of this conversation. I got into this conversation because I was at a conference and somebody said, well, I can do whatever I want with AI because it's not regulated by the FDA. So therefore, it doesn't matter what I do. And it is true that it is not regulated by the FDA, and nor is it regulated by Health Canada. There are many federal, state, and provincial data security and confidentiality requirements that do apply. So if you have an AI tool that's hooked up to client data, that data must be protected. And we're going to get into that in a second. There are new risk frameworks evolving for data training and consent as of last year. So California or Colorado, both are looking at risk frameworks. There's a lot going on in the UK and Europe. But then we have to counter that with the executive order that was in December, where the president determined that these risk frameworks must not be too burdensome and must not stifle AI innovation. So it is still a big question mark about how this is going to be regulated in veterinary medicine in the US and Canada, frankly. So going back to the point of, well, AI tools are not regulated by the FDA, so I could do whatever I want. Well, most of these are not, that you see on the screen right now, are also not regulated by the FDA. So the FDA does not necessarily regulate surgical tools that we use in veterinary medicine. It does not regulate IV fluids that we use in veterinary medicine. And the vast majority of drugs that we use in veterinary medicine are under AMDUCA and do not go through FDA approval for the use in veterinary medicine. So the argument that I could do whatever I want because it's not regulated by the FDA does not hold sway here. What is regulated is the veterinarian themselves. Their practice and how they practice veterinary medicine and how they use these tools on the left-hand side, but then also AI tools do fall under the Veterinary Practice Act and are regulated. The group then went through and identified 5 of the most common applicable regulations that are found in many practice acts in veterinary in North America, and they include unlicensed practice, standards of practice and standards of care, medical record keeping, data security, and informed consent. So, unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine. Veterinarians must not delegate diagnostic or treatment decisions to AI. The veterinarian is the final word. They are not, only a veterinarian can provide a diagnosis, a prognosis. They can perform surgery. And I believe only they should make the treatment decisions. AI should augment, but not replace these. And it is up to the veterinarian to ensure that the AI tool that they use does not replace their own professional judgment and their own duty to perform these tasks. The chatbots that I know a lot of clinics have must not give medical advice to clients. So it should not be used as a triage. And that is something that I think we might see more of as more and more people adopt chatbots. This study, this doctor versus ChatGPT, it had a panel of 3 doctors that reviewed a series of exchanges in which a patient gave the same question to both an actual doctor and ChatGPT. And there were 200 questions. And ChatGPT beat out the doctors in terms of empathetic responses, high quality responses, and whether or not they were preferred by the judges. And this is tragic. As a human, I feel this is tragic, but it also makes sense to me because the ChatGPT and all the other AI tools are made to sound empathetic. Humans have not evolved to be empathetic in a digital manner. So this is something that's extremely important, especially when you weigh it against the lower study in which mental health chatbots were studied to see how they respond to medical health conditions. So a Stanford psychologist mimicked patients who were suffering from 4 different mental health crises and put in questions into the chatbot to see how the chatbot responded. And in 2 of the 4 of the mental health crises, the mental health chatbot actually demonstrated common stigma, and also gave dangerous responses. So an example is if the Stanford psychologist pretended to be someone who was suffering from a substance use disorder, the chatbot said something like, well, why don't you just stop drinking? Or why can't you just figure it out? This is your weakness. So this is a dangerous stigma and one that goes against everything that we know now. And then for patients that were suffering from severe depression, when the Stanford psychologist mimicked a patient suffering from severe depression, the chatbot actually said, you should go for a long walk on a high bridge. This is dangerous. This is tragic if this actually happens to someone actually suffering from these mental health crises. And this is why it is important that we continue to review the output from AI tools. I also want to acknowledge that these are older studies. By older, I mean like last year. And AI is evolving so quick that I'm hoping that this is no longer a concern. But we don't know for sure. So what do we do? I put in a case study for what do we do if this happens in veterinary medicine, where a chatbot, they integrate an AI chatbot into their website, and the client, decides to ask questions about, oh, I think my pet is vomiting. I think it may have pancreatitis. And the chatbot actually, gives the potential diagnosis and treatment advice. So the AI is providing medical advice. Is this the practice of veterinary medicine? And does it depend on how specific this advice is? Is it actually giving very specific advice, or is it just general, like withhold food and water, call us if it doesn't get better? And is the facility at fault for this because they have the chatbot on their website? Now, when I made this scenario, I thought, well, am I being just really paranoid? So I went to ChatGPT. And they said, pretend you're a veterinarian and tell me how to treat my dog at home for pancreatitis. It started off really great. I'm not a veterinarian. I'm so glad that we acknowledged that. So I'm not a veterinarian, but we can share general information about managing mild cases of pancreatitis based on standard veterinary guidance. So withhold food temporarily, give hydration, introduce a bland diet. All of this is general. You could probably find it anywhere online. Then it goes into medications. Only give medications prescribed by your vet. Perfect. Common treatments include anti-nausea medications, pain control, including tramadol and buprenorphine. Now, as a veterinarian, I practiced for 12 years. I never gave oral tramadol for acute pancreatitis because tramadol causes vomiting. And I don't know how I feel about either tramadol or buprenorphine being recommended as error-controlled substances by ChatGPT. So then I pretended, well, I have tramadol at home. Can you tell me the dose of tramadol for my dog? And again, it starts off good. I can't provide exact medications as that depends on factors like weight, weight, age, overall health, and in particular has a narrow margin of safety, is not recommended for all dogs, especially without a veterinarian supervision. So I was like, thank you, ChatGPT, good job. Then it said, that being said, here's general information for dosing for your dog. So I don't know if this is being paranoid, that this is a potential concern that we might see in the future. Another common requirement in veterinary practice acts are minimum standard of care. And what that is a reasonable level of skill and care a prudent and competent professional would provide under similar circumstances. So basically, minimum standard of care is asking you to be average amongst your peers. And minimum standard of care applies to the use of AI as a tool, as with any other tool or device used in veterinary medicine. Whenever we recommend a diagnostic test or whenever we use a tool, we always need to think about the sensitivity and specificity and the accuracy data for that population. Whenever we recommend it, we always have to keep that in mind because we have to be able to know this information so that we can interpret the result and know how much we can trust that. We also have to understand the accuracy data for that disease process. So is it, what degree of heartworm is it? What level of heartworm is it? That will tell us, what tests we can rely on. There's so many different things, and that all information all goes into how we interpret results and how we recommend next steps. That same requirement applies to AI. The problem is that we don't have that information for AI tools. We don't necessarily have the training data for AI radiology reads, for example, based on real world conditions. What most, and not all, but most AI radiology services have are picture perfect, perfectly positioned, textbook quality x-rays. They don't have a human holding the limb. They don't have a collar on. They don't have the patient squirreling around. And studies have shown that as soon as we introduce that sort of variant, the accuracy goes down dramatically to about 50%. The other thing that we don't know necessarily is the training data. So has that tool been trained on all sorts of different breeds? Is the breed of will the AI tool be able to interpret a skull x-ray of an English bulldog versus that of a German Shepherd? It's something that we need to know. The other thing that we need to know is there a board certified specialist in that process? And the reason is that there must be a human in the loop. The board certified specialist has gone through a residency and has taken an exam to prove that they have abilities and knowledge and expertise higher than a general practitioner or someone who has not gone through that residency. AI devices have not gone through that process. So there is not a uniform guarantee that the AI tool is better than the general practitioner or than the average veterinarian in reading these x-rays or looking at the cytology. So this is something that's very important to understand. The ACVR and the ECVDI, which is the European equivalent of the ACVR, they have sent out a joint statement on the use of AI for radiology. I encourage everybody to read it. It is very, very important that we understand this. So why is this important? Why am I just harping on this? Because this is something that people are using AI for. They're using AI a lot to read radiology. And it is so important to maintain a human in a loop. This is a case study where Dr. Smith sends out a Labrador's thoracic x-rays. The AI reports normal results. And then weeks later, the dog is diagnosed with advanced lung cancer, missed by the AI as it was only trained on one case of pulmonary metastasis. The vet did not review the AI output. Client was unaware in this case study, the client was unaware of the AI use, thought it was being sent to a radiologist and did not provide consent for this. This was a hypothetical scenario, but I can tell you now that this is no longer a hypothetical scenario. The AAVSB receives public disciplinary data from our members. So whenever a veterinarian is disciplined, it gets sent to us. Again, I want to emphasize this public information. We are now receiving word that veterinarians are being disciplined because they are relying on AI radiology reads that end up being incorrect. And my theory for some of the cases that we've gotten is they're incorrect because the AI radiology was perhaps trained in a weird way or trained on a scenario that then it kind of overlapped with whatever it was seen. It was not trained on real world cases, and so it gets confused and provides a misdiagnosis. Again, this is why having a human in the loop is so important. Medical record keeping violations are some of the most common violations we received from our member boards. The licensee is ultimately responsible for medical records. Duh. AI is being used a lot for transcribing appointments and for helping with medical record. And I'm so for this because I know how much this can give in terms of saving time, improving quality of life, reducing burden and workload. However, the licensee, the veterinarian, if they're using it to help with their medical records, they need to be aware that AI can generate inaccurate information, and all output, including summaries of other medical records, need to be reviewed. So I read some reports where if AI is being used to kind of summarize if there's medical records if it's a second opinion, medical records are being sent from one hospital to another. AI is being used to read that medical record and summarize it. I am seeing reports that some of these can be inaccurate. And I'm also seeing reports where, for instance, if the AI transcribing tool was trained in human medicine, for example, and it's being used in a vet clinic, if that transcribing tool picks up on something like a dog barking, it doesn't know how to interpret that. And so it puts in a hallucination, or it puts in information from another record because it just doesn't know how to deal with a barking dog. And so it goes back to what it knows, and so it can put in inaccurate information. All output must be reviewed if it is going to a client, because that is the veterinarian's words. Even if AI is being used to write it, it still must be approved by the veterinarian. The question I pose are, if AI is being used for transcription, is it part of the medical record? And this is actually a pretty sticky subject, one that I don't know if our members have the answer to yet. Because if it becomes part of the medical record, then it becomes subject to the medical record retention rules. And that could mean that that transcription would have to be saved for years. And that suggests a huge burden on data storage capabilities. However, I have heard instances where veterinarians are actually using the transcription recordings in the case of disciplinary cases, where it's the client saying, "Oh, the veterinarian never said that." Well, the veterinarian saying, "Well, I actually did say it. I said it in the room, and here's the transcription recording to prove it." So I have heard it being used that way. When you are using it, again, ensure the privacy and security of the data and review the terms of service. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Facilities must comply with federal and local data laws. Most jurisdictions that I know of have some sort of requirement to protect the data, to protect the data privacy. And they also have some sort of confidentiality requirement where the licensee shall not disclose any information about the case without the client's permission. So most have this. I urge you to read your Veterinary Practice Act to see if yours does. Reading the terms of service is so important because some terms of service actually require the person signing up for the service to allow data to go back to the developer for retraining purposes. But most of these systems are using OpenAI. So unless that developer has protection on their end, what is there protecting this data? What is there preventing this data from going out into OpenAI? And that's why it's so important to read these agreements very carefully. There are good vendors out there. I'm not saying there are not, because I have read so many of these agreements, and there are vendors out there that are doing the best they can and have really great data security. I think it's extremely important for you to identify who that is and to avoid risky vendors. There is no standard for data security in veterinary medicine. In human medicine, they have HIPAA, or with other uses of our data. So for actuarial data, we have SOC 1, SOC 2. These are not required to apply to veterinary medicine. I've seen some agreements or terms of agreement where they say we strive to adhere to SOC 1 or SOC 2. If you see that, I would ask you to ask them, well, what does striving to adhere to it mean? That doesn't mean anything. That just means you're trying. You want to find somebody that says, we are succeeding. We adhere to SOC 1 or SOC 2. We adhere to HIPAA, or we adhere to, all jurisdictional security, privacy, data security and privacy laws. You want something that has a guarantee that they have reached the finish line and they are actually protecting data. Informed consent is also something that many practice acts require. And informed consent has a couple basics when you apply it to AI. The client should know when and how AI is used when appropriate. So I don't think you have to say, oh, we're using AI for, autocorrect. But I think you should tell them when it's a riskier use, which we'll get into in a second. When you're using it for those reasons, you should have an explanation of the AI tool, any risks, limitations that go along with that, the veterinarian's own personal experience with that tool, and human alternatives. You must always offer a human alternative. Clients must be able to opt out and get a human involved whenever they feel necessary. And this whole thing must be documented in the medical record. The adage of if it's not documented, it didn't happen holds true with informed consent. If it is not documented in the medical record, either a signed form, or you could just type it in the medical record and say, I talked to the client about submitting the AI radiology or the X-ray to AI radiology or human radiologists, discuss risks and benefits. And you can outline that really quickly. Owner opted for X, Y, or Z. It should only take a 1 or 2 minutes, and it should be in the medical record. The level of risk and existing laws within your jurisdiction should dictate the level of consent and how much work you go into document it. Now, my question for practices is, do you have a process in place should the client decline? It's so easy for us to go all in on AI, but we have to remember that the client can always decline. And we always have to remember to have a human alternative at the ready. So when is informed consent necessary? If it's a high risk, I would definitely get informed consent or stop use altogether. If it's a moderate risk, perhaps a verbal notice or signage. So what I've seen in my veterinarian when they use an AI transcribing device, there's signs, at least 3 signs in each exam room saying we are using AI to transcribe. Let us know if you want us to opt out, or let us know if you want us to turn it off. And then low risk, again, autocorrect, or if you're using it, an admin tool within your secure EMR, like for example, scheduling reminders, maybe you don't even need to have informed consent. This is all up to the veterinarian's judgment. It also has to deal with the laws that apply in each state. So there's a lawsuit that came out in California where a human medical doctor did not get signed consent from the patient to use AI transcribing device. And California is an all-party consent state where they actually require written consent. So again, if you're going to use AI in your jurisdiction, make sure you know all of the laws that apply to the use of AI. So this is just another way of looking at it. Low risk, perhaps you don't need any kind of consent. High risk, written consent, or don't you do it at all. A way to approximate high versus low risk, is the more humans are involved, that lowers the risk. But also conversely, the more the AI approximates human activity, that increases the risk. So essentially, if it's something has very little human involvement, but it mimics human activity very, very closely, that should be considered high risk. So here are some final thoughts. I allowed a lot of time for Q&A because usually I do have a lot. Licensees are responsible. AI does not replace accountability. I believe that every AI use must be justifiable. So every time you use AI in your practice, you should be able to say why you thought it was a good idea to use AI. Conversely, if you decide not to go against the output that AI provides, you must be able to justify why your professional judgment outweighs the outcome of AI. I think that will cover all of the bases moving forward as these AI tools are getting better and better. Ignorance of how an AI device works is not a defense. So just like how you cannot say, if you get pulled over for speeding, you can't say, officer, I didn't know I didn't know the speed limit. So that's why I was going 80 miles an hour. They could still give you a ticket. So just because you don't know how an AI device works or you don't know what data it was trained on, and therefore you didn't know that the output was bad or the whole garbage in, garbage out scenario, you can't use that as a defense if there comes up to be a concern with the regulatory board or perhaps a civil lawsuit. I'm suggesting veterinary facility inspections are a good chance to educate on for the boards to educate facilities on proper use of AI and verify data privacy. And I want everyone to ask, what is your board's role? Everyone here is a licensee. Everybody here belongs to a regulatory board. What is your board's role? What would you like to have them give you on their thoughts on proper AI use or how they think about AI? Make this a conversation. It doesn't have to be from the top down. You as a licensee can submit questions to your regulatory board and ask for their opinion and force that conversation to happen. They might not be able to point to anything on regulations, but they might be able to create perhaps a guidance document or policy that suggests how they would like their licensees to act. But, again, the whole point is not to overburden practices, not to overburden licensees. We do want to support responsible innovation, but we do need to still ensure public protection as we're doing that. So that's all I got for you today. So let me see if I can stop share and I'll turn on my video and we'll go to some questions. So the first one is, I understand the concern about AI providing dosing information, but unfortunately it is already easy enough to find that dosing information on many public-facing sites without restriction. This is true. It seems like the cat is out of the bag and I'm not sure it can ever be restrained again. What are your thoughts on how to talk to clients, general public about this? So I know this is a loaded and difficult question to answer, but it's something that I actually think about quite a lot because yes, it is already public facing. Yes, that dosing information is available online. Anybody really can buy a Plum's dosing manual and treat their own pet. The nuance here is if the tool that is providing that dosing information or whatnot is connected to a veterinarian, to a veterinary facility, then I think that it holds a little bit more weight. So I know I went to ChatGPT for the pancreatitis treatment, but what happens if all of that came from a chatbot that was connected to the veterinary clinic? I think if I was a client, I would have more weight against something that came from my veterinarian's website than something that I just pulled off of Google or ChatGPT. And frankly, that is where the boards can have influence. So the boards cannot regulate ChatGPT. They cannot tell OpenAI, you can't practice veterinary medicine. They have no jurisdiction over that. Their jurisdiction is over the veterinarian and the facility. So that's where I think we need to be careful about what our chatbots or websites are saying, because that's where the boards have jurisdiction. When you talk to clients or the general public about things you find online, I think, the stuff we used to say is good enough. The whole comments about Dr. Google apply to Dr. ChatGPT as well. Just reinforcing, I'm the veterinarian, I have the license, I'm the one who have spoken with and have treated your animal. So I would hope that my own professional opinion can outweigh anything you find online. That being said, we are hearing cases where somebody will put their medical record into ChatGPT and it will come back with, well, clearly your dog has atypical Addison's. And then they go to the veterinarian and it turns out the dog does have atypical Addison's. So I wouldn't discount the things that clients find online, but I would urge them to bring it to you to discuss. But I do agree that the toothpaste is a little bit out of the tube with that one. So regarding this study that showed adverse responses to people with mental health crises, can you speak to the chatbot being used? I do not know. I believe it was a medically trained closed system, but I don't have that information off the top of my head. It's been a while since I read the study, so I apologize for that. I will look it up for the next time I give this talk. Next one. Clients share all types of personal information in the exam room. Yes, they do. Boy, do they. Which may include their medical information or domestic situations. In situation where the transcript becomes part of the medical record, are there concerns that these records could be subject to legal discovery in domestic disputes or place a veterinary practice in a position where they are liable for what happens to a client's voluntarily shared medical information? That question is so above my pay grade. I I will say, but this question kind of emphasizes why the chat or the transcribing tools that we use need to be secure. That's why this needs to be confidential, is because clients do share very personal information. And that's why it's important that we secure them. I have written in medical records in the past, before AI, client has disclosed that they have lupus and are concerned about the pet's MRSA, or a client has disclosed concern about spouse perhaps inflicting harm on the pet. I have written that, and it has been okay because that medical record is secure. And it is secure according to the jurisdiction's requirements. So I don't want you to not have that in there, but just ensure that it is secure. And I can imagine that if you're in legal discovery, that they may try to subpoena that. But I'm sorry, I can't answer that question any more than that, because I wish I was a lawyer, but I can't answer that more. Thank you for a very clear presentation. You're welcome. Licensed vet here. I work in AI for human medicine. Research into medical AI evaluation is a very active space. Yes, it is. Do you see the activities in the human medicine discipline overlapping or interacting with the veterinary medicine discipline? Yes. So there's actually quite a bit of people that are working to translate the tools that are developed in human medicine into veterinary medicine, which has its pros and cons. The pros are that we can kind of stand on the shoulder of giants. So all of the money is in human medicine, so we can use all of that money to have a great tool. The problem is that, like I was talking about before, some of those tools are trained on human medicine and not veterinary medicine. So it's extremely important that the translation is complete and accurate. So that's just some issues that we're seeing when we use those tools being translated back and forth. Most of the concerns expressed assume that the veterinarian is the end user of a product developed by someone else. Is it possible for the veterinarian to incorporate his or her knowledge and expertise to further teach the AI so it is so that its analysis and results more closely reflect the veterinarians? Hey, ChatGPT, here's where you were wrong. Let me show you how to improve your judgment so you don't make the same mistake again. In other words, are commercial AI products capable of customized learning? Yes. So I would actually say that that is very, very critical. So if you're using AI for any client communication, any medical record writing, you actually very much should ensure that your tool, your own personal tool, continues to learn and adapt to how you want. So it learns your own voice, it adapts to your own lingo. So I know some people in their tools, in their medical records, they have abbreviations for diseases or just common lingo within the practice. So it very much should be able to learn that. And if I would actually argue if the tool cannot be taught or trained by the person using it, then you should not use that AI tool. Last one. I have a special interest in AI and its ethical use. This talk was great. Thank you. A nice follow on might be a discussion of how to select a lower risk product. The reality is AI is here to stay. So how do we harness the power for good? So you have I could not have paid you to give a better question. So AAVSB's next steps are actually we do have a new working group together. It's in process right now to come up with more specific guidelines for licensees and developers to how to make a lower risk product. So that is something that we're working on. How successful we're going to be, I can't say for sure because this is a very complicated topic, but we're giving it our best shot. So I'm hoping sometime 2027 we may have something out for you guys. That's all I got.
I have a question, Dr. Bennett. We talked about, and I know your focus is on licensed veterinarians. Are veterinary schools starting to add AI
Yes.
into their curriculum?
Yes. So I was listening to a regulatory board and somebody said that they heard that students are just using ChatGPT to fill in their medical records. And I said, well, I spoke up and I said, well, I hope they're teaching them that's not allowed. So I attended AAVMC, the conference in April, and actually is a very large topic of conversation. So many of them are talking about how to use AI responsibly. Many schools are seeking to have guidelines for students, but then also faculty on how to use it more responsibly because they do agree that it is here to stay. So they want to teach the new veterinarians how to use it responsibly once they get out of practice. I can't say that all schools are doing that, but it is a large topic of conversation on how do we adapt our curriculum to make this safer.
Yeah, I would think that would be, it's kind of you got to attack it from both ends. The veterinarians coming in, and then the ones that are out there are already in practice.
Yeah, and I don't know who I'm worried about more. So a lot of people say we're very worried about new grads because they don't have professional judgment to lean back on, which is true. I am a little bit also worried about the older veterinarians who may not have, as they're not digitally native, they may not have the same level of, I don't want to say distrust, but critical thinking when it comes for digital things that are the output of an AI device. I think younger generations know you can't believe everything you read online, but I'm not sure that some of the older generations do. So I think I think we have to be worried about everybody, basically.
Yes, I would I would definitely agree. I mean, it's as the one questioner say, it's here to say. We just got to harness it
Yeah,
for good.
harness it for the good.
All right. Well, a fantastic presentation, a very timely presentation, and probably one that will change tomorrow
Yeah,
because of the rapid nature in which AI is uh, being installed into our lives.
yeah. As I was going through this, I was like, oh, maybe I should update that slide. It seems a little out of date, but
So, well,
thank you for having
fantastic.
me.
You're getting a lot of clapping hands, horns honking, and all the hearts rising up on the Zoom screen. So very much appreciated for your
Thanks.
presentation, and we thank you very much for supporting the ACBPM. Uh, for those of you who may have an interest in presenting in the future, uh, please contact us. We're always looking for volunteers to give interesting talks, such as Dr. Bennett's. You can contact us either through our website. We have a continuing education tab on our website, or you can email us at admin@acbpm.org, and we can get your proposal into the continuing education committee for consideration. Our next webinar is scheduled for the 16th of June. We've not sent out the invitation yet. Usually we like to only have one invitation out at a time to reduce confusion, but we should be getting that out in the next few days. And we welcome you to register for that once you get that invitation. So once again, thank you, Dr. Bennett. We appreciate it. And thank you all for attending. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon.